Hello everyone! For those of you that don't know, the UK is now in a third lockdown, and I'm so bored of covering lockdowns I'm not going to go into it because I'm going to repeat myself, and repeating myself will probably mean that my channel gets banned. And you're probably wondering what I mean by this. Well, according to the website Campaign Live, Talk Radio seeks answers over surprise YouTube ban. The Google-owned video giant did not comment as to why the News UK-owned radio brand was removed from their website. So yes, Talk Radio appears to have had the Alex Jones treatment, along of course with many other people who have been banned without sufficient explanation from YouTube. And it appears that Talk Radio is in the same boat. News UK has claimed Google has not provided answers as to why it removed Talk Radio's video channel from YouTube, several hours after the radio brand's official posts disappeared from the platform. Google, which owns YouTube, has not responded to Campaign's request for comment for why Talk Radio has been removed in the early hours of this morning. Viewers trying to access the Talk Radio page on Tuesday morning reported seeing the error message, "This account has been terminated for violating YouTube's community guidelines," which basically means YouTube felt like taking them off the platform. As we have seen many times over, such as Alex Jones, such as Stefan Molyneux, and even smaller channels such as Drunken Uncle, have all been terminated without sufficient reason, or at least without comment from YouTube as to their reasoning behind these bans. Campaign Live goes on. YouTube has a 3-strike policy system in which it reserves the right as a private media company to ban content providers from the platform for breaches. The policy bans any content relating to the pandemic that contradicts medical information issued by local authorities or the WHO. So basically, if your government or the WHO say something, which by the way the WHO is also fairly critical of lockdowns, but I'm not allowed to say that, then that means that you will get a strike on your channel. Or, I mean, I don't know what Talk Radio's other 2 strikes were for. I doubt they had 2 other strikes. So it seems to just be a random ban hammer out of nowhere. In September, Friday Drive Time presenter Mark Dolan went viral for protesting against the wearing of face masks by cutting one up live on air. While Dolan is a comedian by profession, public health experts routinely say face masks should be worn at all times in public spaces, indoors, to prevent the spread of COVID-19. And I'm not going to comment because I don't want to get banned. But if they were really kicked off the platform for a video that happened in September, I would call that unduly harsh. That was over 4 months ago. Which technically means that with all my criticising of lockdowns and how the COVID-19 has been reported, I could also be on the chopping block. Luckily you're watching this video and that hasn't quite happened yet. However, as Campaign went to press with this story, the page is described by YouTube as being merely unavailable. Talk Radio is licensed by Ofcom in the UK, and the regulator has not made any rulings against the radio brand over alleged COVID-19 misinformation. So it appears that YouTube is a bigger arbiter in the UK of what should be allowed on their platform, and they're not a publisher, by the way, according to them, than Ofcom, the UK's own government regulator. The channel, which live streams and repurposes radio content from Talk Radio, the flagship wireless radio brand, has around 250,000 subscribers and had attained millions of YouTube views in recent years, and deservedly so. I think they actually do pretty good work. And the article then goes into comments from Talk Radio who basically say the same things. But yes, on the point of YouTube being a platform, they are not. They are a publisher, and I think they should be treated as so by the countries it operates in, which is basically America, but I don't see a problem with it being operated as a publisher in every country that has YouTube available. I've done a video on this a while ago, but I may as well summarise it here. If YouTube is treated as the publisher it is, that means that any case of defamation from YouTube that goes to court means that YouTube will be liable for what is being brought up in court because they are publishing that content, because they do curate what goes on their platform. I'm sorry, their website. Whereas if they act as a platform and don't actually curate what goes on it, of course I mean within reason, I'm fine with YouTube banning any type of porn, but they seem to be very inconsistent at that anyway, then the entire legal battle is fought with the individual or company that performed the defamation and uploaded it to YouTube, not YouTube itself. I think that will provide enough incentive for YouTube to actually act as the platform it says it is, and will finally allow people to broadcast themselves. So with this being on the same day as the lockdowns being announced for England, Newsnight on the BBC had comments from Toby Young, head of the Free Speech Union, and Ian Duckton, editor from politics.co.uk. So let's have a brief look at what they had to say.
Was it right for YouTube to think, even temporarily, that taking this talk radio content down was right? Toby?
I mean, just put my comment in first. No, it was obviously wrong.
No, absolutely not. I think it's a completely unacceptable assault on the freedom of the press. And YouTube has, in fact, behaved, I think, very badly, very censoriously throughout the crisis.
Gotta agree, it's getting to a point where even I'm not particularly comfortable criticising what the government is doing now. That's why I'm doing this video instead of covering Boris Johnson's new lockdown for England. And honestly, I'm thinking about unlisting my old videos on COVID because I'm so worried about this.
They actually took down a video featuring Professor Carol Sikora at the beginning of the crisis, even though he's a former director of the World Health Organization's cancer program.
Yes, I've covered this as well. YouTube seems to be the arbiter of what is allowed to be said on the COVID crisis, and given it seems to be one of the main forms of video content that we see on the internet, them having this power is quite ridiculous. And if they do have this power, they should have oversight from government bodies, treating them as publishers, as I say, because they are publishing what they think is right, rather than allowing for people to broadcast themselves and allow them to share their opinions because it goes against their governments and the WHO. Even though, as Toby said, they took down a video of a guy from the WHO criticising lockdowns.
They removed a video of me in discussion with Michael Levitt, and they only restored it when I pointed out that Michael Levitt had won the Nobel Prize for Chemistry in 2014.
I mean, at this point, if any normie knew all that, I can't see them ever trusting YouTube. Obviously, those of us who have worked with YouTube for, well, at least 2 years like I have, we know that you can never trust it, and that is why I have to be vaguely careful with what I say on it. And I like to think I am.
And the problem, I think, with YouTube trying to censor anything which dissents from COVID orthodoxy is that the orthodoxy is constantly changing.
Okay.
Let's not forget that the WHO tweeted on the 14th of January that there was no evidence of human-to-human transmission. The Advertising Standards Authority censured an advertiser for claiming that masks would help reduce transmission of the virus. People have flip-flopped on all sorts of things, asymptomatic transmission.
We'll come back to that. Let's hear from Ian, your response to that.
Yes, Toby Young has absolutely nailed it there. The story with COVID-19 seems to change from week to week, month to month, whatever, and I've covered this myself. The first lockdown was flatten the curve, the second lockdown was oh my god, cases are rising, and the third one is the virus is mutated. And criticism of any of these can now mean your YouTube channel is in danger of getting suspended or banned. Hence this video is purely about free speech YouTube. Anyway, let's see what Ian Dunt has to say.
No, YouTube shouldn't be getting rid of videos. I agree with Toby on that matter, actually. This isn't the time to be censoring people. We'd be doing much better if we were providing positive, reliable information for them.
Well, that's where the problem comes in. Everything about COVID seems to be purely negative. And again, as I said before, the information seems to change from month to month. YouTube, I am not making comment on the current COVID narrative. Please don't ban me.
The question isn't, should you be able to put out this information? It's should you write it or publish it in the first place? Is it responsible to do it? Is it truthful to do it? Does it show some kind of moral consideration?
Does it provide moral consideration when you write or record a video and publish it to YouTube and it is criticising the government? I think any criticism of anything is actually rather amoral. I think criticism of a position of any kind does not come into morals. I think morals are purely shown through action, because these criticisms do not harm anyone. In some cases, maybe very good criticisms. And if we are all told you are being immoral for criticising the current COVID narrative, I think that is just silly and not a position anyone should take. And even if the criticisms are bad, they are good for bouncing off maybe good ideas from. This was the point that John Stuart Mill made in On Liberty. Even the bad/evil ideas should stick about so that we can find the good off them. So a bit of a silly point from Ian, but at least he agrees that the question shouldn't be, should we ban these people from speaking? At least he's on the side that YouTube shouldn't be censoring people. But he makes a silly point after that, so what can you do?
Does it show an attempt to chisel away at public trust in the middle of a pandemic? And the answer to that question is no. You shouldn't be publishing it. You shouldn't be writing it. You have no basis upon which to do it. And I honestly don't know how I'd sleep at night if I was someone who was publishing or writing it myself.
So YouTube shouldn't ban these people from criticising the current COVID narrative, but the people who do such evil things should be ashamed of themselves. I mean, are you saying these people should self-censor, Ian? Because I don't agree with that. People can put out whatever opinion they like. But if you're just coming out saying they have no basis, etc., 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 you do have to back all that up, as the people criticising it have done, as Toby Young did literally a minute ago.
Isn't that the point? That it's hard to disagree with the principle of freedom of speech, but, Toby, if we start oxygenating views that encourage a change in behaviour that leads to a greater number of deaths, that is dangerous.
Again, these arguments can be flipped on their head. I can't go into any more detail than that because I would like to keep my channel.
That's true, Emily, but the point is we don't know with any degree of certainty, certainly not enough certainty to start censoring people, what kind of behaviour does lead to greater public harm.
No comment, YouTube. I would like to keep my channel.
The position of the lockdown skeptics, and let's not conflate lockdown skeptics with COVID deniers. No one's denying that we're in the midst of a COVID pandemic, or at least no one that contributes to the lockdownskeptics.org website.
Again, I still don't actually know if that's good enough for YouTube, so I'm going to have to keep a no comment policy going on through this bit.
The argument we make, and have been making from the very beginning, is that the collateral damage done by lockdowns,
Toby,
the harms that lockdowns cause, is greater than the harms they prevent.
I mean, again, I don't know if I'm allowed to comment on this any other way than saying Toby Young is wrong because the current government says he's wrong. I don't know if I can risk saying that. And this is the problem with all authoritarian regimes. The main way they get people is because people don't know what they are and aren't allowed to do. And they'll inevitably slip up, as I'm doing my best not to. And the main reason I say that this is against the government is because what the presenter is about to say.
So
you were arguing that.
To...
I have your article here from the 25th of June, and you say the much ballyhooed second spike has refused to materialise. The virus has all but disappeared. And then you say it's becoming clear that the social distancing rules, even the new 1 metre rule, are unnecessary. And then you accuse the scientists, the chief scientists, of overplaying it so it doesn't hurt their reputation.
In his defence, at no point in those quotes does he say that COVID doesn't exist. He is just saying, on YouTube, this is not me saying it or agreeing with him, but Toby Young is just saying that what the scientists and the government is saying about COVID are overblown. This channel does not agree with that because this channel would like to keep going on YouTube.
It's not denying COVID per se, but it seemed to be ignoring that it's actually amongst us.
Oh, thank you. So he wasn't denying COVID like you just accused him. Good one, presenter. But from then on, they keep discussing the virus and don't really discuss the banning on YouTube anymore, and that's what this video is about. And I would like to keep my channel, so I'm going to avoid going through any more about the virus. So, some good news from the Times. YouTube lifts suspension of Talk Radio in COVID row. YouTube initially declined to tell Talk Radio or the public why it had made the decision to briefly suspend the channel. But hey, at least it's back. So it initially starts with all the information we know. But then it goes into this. YouTube initially declined to tell Talk Radio or the public why it had made the decision to remove the London-based channel. Its temporary ban and initial lack of explanation provoked criticisms by civil liberties groups, with one calling it chilling. A YouTube spokeswoman said Talk Radio's YouTube channel was briefly suspended, but upon further review, it has now been reinstated. We quickly removed flagged content that was violate our community guidelines, including COVID-19 content that explicitly contradict expert consensus from local health authorities or the WHO. We make exceptions for material posted with an educational, documentary, scientific or artistic purpose, as we deemed in this case, and I doubt they will give this channel and smaller ones like it the same leeway. But again, I just have to comment on how ridiculous this is. YouTube, the consensus from local health authorities and the WHO has been constantly changing to the point where they contradict each other and have contradicted each other at the same points in time. And honestly, we have to get rid of this whole thinking that a scientific consensus means that is true, because there have been scientific consensuses in the past that have been completely wrong. Just look at the history of geological thought. For God's sake, plate tectonics was only accepted in 1960, and that was about 30 years after the guy who discovered it died. Does this mean if people were talking about plate tectonics and YouTube existed in the 1920s, that those channels would be banned because it goes against scientific consensus? Because honestly, it's the same principle. I mean, I know it's a completely different situation because deciding how the Earth works isn't really as deadly as pandemic diseases. But still, the principle is there. They are banning people for going against scientific consensus. And by the way, YouTube, I am not doing that in this video. What I'm doing in this video is criticising your policy for doing that. It's a completely different issue. Anyway, let's carry on with the article. The London-based station has about 424,000 listeners, is part of the Wireless Group, which is owned by News UK, publisher of The Times. Before the ban was lifted, a spokesperson for Talk Radio said YouTube is making decisions about which opinions the public are allowed to hear, even when they are sourced to responsible and regulated news providers. This sets a dangerous precedent and is censorship of free speech and legitimate national debate. True. Talk Radio is an Ofcom licensed regulated broadcaster and has robust editorial controls in place, taking care to balance debate. We regularly interrogate government data and we have controls in place, use verifiable sources and give space to careful selection of voices and opinions. Right, that's all fine. But YouTube says that's bad. Silky Carlo, the civil liberties group Big Brother Watch, said YouTube's termination of Talk Radio is evidence that big tech censorship is out of control. I agree. The chilling attack is the type of thing you see in China. Again, all true. They should be treated as publishers. If they censor things like this, as they have been doing for years now, then they should be held accountable for the lawsuits that break out because of YouTube videos, because they're the ones allowing it on their platform when they are curating everything else. Man, I should really think about moving to Rumble. So to finish off this video, after Talk Radio was reinstated, they made another account anyway, calling it Talk Radio Highlights, with about 600 subscribers at the moment. I suggest, if you're a fan of Talk Radio, you subscribe to them. But they had a highlight of Mike Graham and Julia Hartley-Brewer talking about their suspension from YouTube, so I thought we'd go through it.
We both this morning, I think, were filled with the joys of spring when I was sitting where you are, because it was a great feeling yesterday to know that we hadn't done anything wrong, that we were not in any way in the naughty corner, we shouldn't have been, and we're now back. Not only are we back, but we're better and bigger than ever now.
Absolutely, yeah. It didn't really work very well, did it?
It really didn't.
YouTube censorship.
Yeah, I'm sure that does feel great. I'm sure Stefan Molyneux and Alex Jones would feel great as well if they got reinstated. Unfortunately, we can't see that happening anytime soon, because at least Talk Radio had all the legal backing of both their own licensing and the UK's Ofcom, which really should be more regulatory than YouTube is. But for some reason, it's been the other way round.
I have to say, I've just actually been listening back to the offending video,
Yes.
apparently. The video that apparently was politically censored for not towing. I'm not quite sure what line I'm supposed to tow. I'm there asking questions and giving evidence and the like. And I still can't work out what it is that YouTube thought I'd done wrong.
Yes, well, unfortunately, that's how they get you. They make things so arbitrary and so hard to follow that they just say, oh, you slipped up there, say goodbye to your channel. And people like Stefan Molyneux and Alex Jones can't really fight against it because they are independent channels who don't really have big government backing like Talk Radio has with Ofcom. So lucky Talk Radio, I guess.
And this was an interview with, was it a
There's a
union?
former president of the National Education Union,
right.
Amanda Martin. Yeah,
Right.
A robust interview. She had plenty of time to have her
As
say.
we have every single day. You know, you have a point of view, they have a point of view, and the listeners can listen to both points of view and make their own minds up.
Yeah, well, that's what freedom of speech is all about. YouTube hate that.
I mean, the substance of the interview, two key things really was whether or not schools should be closed and whether or not there's a risk, but also whether or not teachers should basically jump the queue, as many are calling for, and basically be up there with NHS frontline workers and care home workers to get the vaccine beforehand, despite the fact they're not being at any other risk than anyone else. I mean,
Again, YouTube, not my opinion. I want to keep my channel. But I mean, really, I do have to ask, why would that be against YouTube's terms of service anyway? According to YouTube, it's because that opinion explicitly contradicts what the local government is saying. And really, that is scary, that you cannot criticise your own government with the way they are handling a pandemic. But honestly, I don't want to have any more of these clips than I think is necessary, because I'm worried that having these clips in my video alone will get me a strike from YouTube for going against their community guidelines. I need to be as careful as possible with the content around COVID. I mean, I think I've risked enough with all the Black Lives Matter stuff I've been putting out over the past year. I mean, YouTube already took down one of my videos and then reinstated it 18 plus because I showed some violence that was happening in London during the Black Lives Matter protest then. They've 18 plus locked some videos that are over a year and a half old as well. So I seem to be on their radar, at least when it comes to the algorithms, and I don't want to try and tempt fate here, which I think says more than anything else in this video. I am actually self-censoring at this point because I want to keep my channel, at least till after the 24-hour stream that's coming at the end of the month to raise money for charity. But because of this, that's all I have for you today. So, as usual, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.